Thank you to all of you for hopefully challenging us this morning and reassuring us and renewing our vigour for being disruptive, for being honest, for being courageous, for being brave. So are there any questions immediately from the audience? Yes, gentleman in the back. Yeah. Hang on, sorry, we're streaming it live, hence the microphone, because otherwise we can't hear your question. Thanks, Steph.
I think it was excellent in terms of all the presentations.
Thank you.
So thank you. Nicole touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to hear the panel's view, given the fact that I've got 2 teenage daughters, and I've spent my life, as Roger knows, being a tad of a creative maverick. What you believe the education system should do to move the 2% of us in this world into the 50, 60, 70% of people that actually think and disrupt rather than just follow the rules?
Yeah. It would take longer than even a day for me to talk about the education system. I've got a real bee in my bonnet about it. So therefore, if that's not going to change anytime soon, then the parents need to have an understanding the personalities of themselves, but also of their kids. So I think IQ and being tested for answers, I personally don't think is the way to go 100%. I think a lot of it should be tested on emotional intelligence. Funnily enough, I've been reading a lot about it with Israel. There's a book called Startup Nation, and it talks about, it doesn't say it directly, but there's lots of nuances where non-hierarchical structure with systems. It talks about how can such a little country be so successful that hasn't been around for very long, and neighbours obviously they're filled with war on a minute by minute basis, and the idea they put everything down to the IDF. Which is the Israeli Defence Force, because everyone has to do conscription, literally everyone throughout their whole life, and it's a leveller. So there's no, you've been in there 20 years and you've got a general and they're telling you what to do. If someone who is in the bottom ranks doesn't agree with the general or feels that they're going to have them get killed, they'll just say, I'm not going to be in this guy's platoon. So there's I like how they've done that flat structure. It's non-hierarchical. I like how everyone has to do it in the conscription. And what starts to happen is that there's just a few degrees of separation, which makes people more inclined to collaborate than just be in silos. But if you look at large countries and how they've done it so quickly, Dubai is another example. That went up in like 45 years when you have a lot of people wanting the same thing. It doesn't need to be education how we know it, how they educated Victorians.
I think another thing I'd like to add, do butt in here, anyone, is that technology, as we all know, is very disruptive, and I think people are looking into how we change the entire platform, if you like, of education. So there's hope for us parents of younger children. I have a bee in my bonnet as well, and I'm saying, I went to a conference where teachers and lecturers seemingly had the fear of God in them, because they were like, technology threatening my position, my future, my job. And I was, I think, probably the only stupid person in the room that said, well, no, actually, it's not at all. What it's doing is going to empower you to be what you started in this profession of having this want and need and desire to coach children at whatever level that they are. And that is what being a teacher is. It's about being a coach, because technology will hopefully provide, and I'm sure it's happening at the moment, a platform where kids can go at their own speed. Because all kids have an aptitude to learning. It's about understanding how they learn at different speeds. I learn really, really quickly because I like doing everything really quickly. I'm fearless and I'm full of speed, and I love fast cars and skiing down mountains really fast. I used to race. And I never understood why my next door neighbour, who was, smarter than I was, would go at 1 mile an hour. And she used to bore the hell out of me. It used to really irritate me. But, I equally, my comprehension, if I did it once, was at 60%, where hers was at 98%. So I had to repeat it. But that was my way. Now, if I wasn't challenged, I just stopped. Now, the platforms are going to identify, the algorithms are going to identify where Lulu is at, where Jim is at, where Joe is at and respond accordingly, so the teachers can just see the reports and go, right, okay, Lily needs to do the whole syllabus twice more, or, you know, Jim is going to get there, and equally, I think the other really smart thing about technology, it will go, oh, she's really creative, she needs to probably go and do this, and it will start feeding in because it understands mapping. Artificial intelligence will understand where a human is able to go and push and challenge, and the whole collaboration of AI and VR and AG, all of that, I think is going to be brought into the education system. And I think it's going to be very exciting what happens. So I'm actually not worried. What I'm worried about is if people carry on bickering about how awful it is, which I agree, but let's not focus on the awful. Let's focus on what differences and changes we can make. And if parents continue to, boost their children's confidence, that's all we really need to do. They will take care of the rest. You know, my kids at 2 and 3 were on the iPad and wondering why the TV didn't move, when they touched it. Do you know what I mean? That instinctively, as Nicole was talking about, our instincts are brilliant, okay? All of you have amazing instincts. And it's about really understanding how to be honest with that, how to be truthful with that, but let the technology disrupt your lives and allow it to lift us to where we want to be.
There's in EdTech, I'm a tiny angel investor, but there's a company called The Century, which is all to do with AI and education technology. And that is going to be pivotal in understanding how kids are being taught at school and pace and age range, etc. And all of that data is going to be fed in that will help policy change. So everything that will come out of that, it's run by a lady called Priya and Lakami, and all of that data will help with policy change to give them actual data that they need to change, and they can't just be doing the same thing over and over again. So it's called The Century. And also we've just set up, because Rough Diamond was closed down over the last 4 years, the Ideas Foundation, the guy that used to run it, is setting up a free school. So all of the kids, that will continue on, so we'll still get the kids that are about to be expelled, but what they'll do is they'll go into the free school for about 50 kids, and then there'll be a bigger source of richness of kids where we can look to employ. And it won't just be Ogilvy, it will be whoever, they'll all be our Rough Diamonds.
Roger, you're an investor and a digital consultant. In your world, are you seeing these kind of changes across all different platforms?
I'll relate it back to the personal. So 2 young daughters, much younger than Spiggy, you asked the question, and just entering the school system and experiencing for the first time, myself and my wife, I have an edge and my wife has her own amazing qualities. So together we're not going to create vanilla children, which we all appreciate. And so going into what is an amazing but vanilla school, we're seeing that there are all of a sudden inconsistencies with the path that the school requires and the path that my eldest would like to take. So it's asking the school to understand that there is a different way of doing things, and I absolutely I adore the way that in which you engage with your son's school in that. So I think I might have to start that process in where my own go. The other thing was, is that up until the age of 10, I was sort of classed. I was having incredible learning difficulties, and things weren't going well in school. And it wasn't until I found mechanical engineering that I could actually see what maths meant. Because it didn't mean anything to me on a page, but it meant everything to me when I was stressing out a beam or doing angular velocity. So sometimes you can't see it in the conceptual, but you can see it in 3D. And I think that now the schooling system is so rigid into the rote process that how is a maverick daughter of an entrepreneur and a designer going to fit into a vanilla system?
Yeah, and it is that rigidity that's the problem. Schools, I work in the university sector, and there's been a shift toward away from rewarding intelligence and towards rewarding learning. And so consistently, you're simply asking students to regurgitate what you've taught them, which means that nothing ever goes anywhere. You're constantly living in the present and the past without pushing anything forwards. And that's a function of fear. It goes back to your point. It's a function of the fact that education is a business. Businesses perform by getting results, and results are a function of not allowing students to fail. You know, everyone's got to do well. And we none of these ideas will work until there is the acknowledgement of what is important in education.
So this is a question to the whole panel, because it might be a slightly different answer from Chris and Damien versus Roger and Nicole. But is innovation creating a brilliant idea or succeeding to launch to market?
Personally, everyone has ideas. It's making them happen that sets it apart. And as I've discovered, it's not easy. It's just not easy, and you need to have a certain kind of personality to just do it.
It's brutal hard work. Absolute. I've yet to have a great idea that went to market beautifully, seamlessly, without any problems whatsoever. the articulation gap between an idea and going to market is usually that sort of brutal hard work stage that people don't really tell you about.
And not compromising.
And there's obviously an aspect about timing. But more importantly, isn't there an aspect about team? I don't know if you want to answer that, Damien.
It's so back to the first point. I agree. It's both, isn't it? It's the idea. You can't do anything without an idea, but that drive is that drive to succeed and work is either innate or it's not. And this is where team comes into play. It's because in a balanced team, that drive can come from someone in it. It doesn't need to be everyone. And creativity can come from someone in that team. And I have to say, most of our creative thought actually comes from Chris and his team in terms of content, with the drive coming from the rest of us. So I think it's all of it, isn't it? It's and timing. Well, again, Nicole's talk I really enjoyed, because sometimes, every other day we're going back and thinking, is the market ready for this? And it's that constant drive to say, we are going to change the way businesses think about this.
But Damien, 20 years ago we had an idea that we both thought was brilliant, and now everybody's doing it. Yeah. Everybody's doing it. We were going through the web a few weeks ago, looking at all of those businesses who were doing exactly what we were going to do in Richmond 20 years ago, and we didn't have the balls to do it.
Well, we didn't have the site.
Well, I think also...
Who can find us a site? There was a video earlier.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So that's why innovation within, it's such a shame with Ogwin, the CEO that closed it, was that she said that innovation needs to be in everyone's blood. But when people are doing a day job, you just you can't see what's going on in the outside world and bring it in. So you do need to, because there's so many things that are happening globally, and that could make the difference between making something happen and it never happening.
I think I was chatting to Gareth before this, actually, and they're at a really interesting stage, their business. And I think it's so many businesses never get to that next stage because they are so in the weeds. And actually going and getting external investment early can really unlock that, because it stops you worrying about the things that suffocate a business. Or get a strategic partner that's going to enable you, and those are things that we're exploring ourselves at the moment, because otherwise you just end up working so hard on the day job.
Roger?
Yeah, I'll relate it back to the team for a moment, and I will talk about CivTech just on that set, because there was the sponsor, who was the political interface, which was Colin Cook, who managed upwards and downwards. There was the unreasonable person, Alexander Holt, who the advancement of civilization relies upon unreasonable behaviour, and change will happen if you stamp your feet and make it. And so you need an unreasonable person in each team.
Well, that's Edward de Bono's hat.
Yeah, absolutely. Then there was Mark Elliott, who's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. There was Rui looking at the complexities, and there was Katie telling the story, and Joe curating the accelerators. So it was an incredible, the team makeup and the skill sets and the trust, the absolute trust that each of them were completely in control of their areas, and the respect and the trust within the team was absolute, and if you just knew that they had their point, that they were going to do what they said they were going to do when they said they were going to do it, and that's real team trust.
I think innovation, when you're innovative, you also have to have a very strong self-esteem, where you really know yourself and you really know, actually, I'm really crap at that, but I know someone that's their strength. So that when within the lab team, the emotional intelligence testing was crucial for us. And I think if you're trying to push something forward, you can't be good at everything. You can't have this Truman Show facade, which is in a lot of large organisations where they don't want to show vulnerability. And they don't want to say, do you know what, we're up shit creek, let's roll our sleeves up and we're all in it together. You know, you get a CEO that does that, they're a proper leader, because we're all then on their side. You get someone with a cucumber up their arse, you can just see it. They're tense, they're like the world on their shoulders, and you're just never going to move forward because the facade is, I can't show weakness.
What's interesting is that it reminds me of the story of one of our speakers at Honey Buzz, Mark Hodgson, prolific blog writer. And he said, interestingly, his best blogs are the ones he writes really quickly, in a hurry. There's bound to be mistakes, and there are mistakes. Had to get it out, the pre-Christmas or whatever it was. And he said, they're the ones that are read the most. He said, it's bizarre. As soon as you humanise, let's go back to honesty, as soon as you humanise things, people can read, people interpret and people understand genuine. And they're actually drawn. And, actually what great business and commercial effectiveness business is about creating engagement, isn't it? So great engagement is about being honest and being genuine and being true. Which brings me to segue on to Nicole, a difficult question perhaps, especially as it's live, but obviously you've touched on it, but would you be prepared to share the story of why such a successful innovation, Ogilvy Labs, was actually cut? Yeah.
I mean, the good thing is that I walk with the truth, because there was when the lab was cut, it was cut because it wasn't commercial enough. So there are, we work in an environment that is it looks at a spreadsheet, and we were a line item on a spreadsheet, and maybe the books didn't add up in August, and maybe they wanted to take a line item out in the July, and that is just the way of the business world. And there are some that get it and there are some that don't. So I don't ever harbour any negativity, because it just, I had 16 incredible years. So therefore, and I understand, my answer was always on the line. I just had some very aggressive supporters probably for 16 years thinking, over my dead body, do you touch her? But obviously, we're at this point in time, different management skills, different needs or wants. But I think it was as simple as a line item. The difference is that when it came to the announcement, I wouldn't sign an announcement that wasn't the truth. So the announcement was going to be, where you sign it, it's going to be Nicole in true entrepreneurial fashion is going to be leaving the Ogilvy, and we're so sad. And anyone that knows her will know that she's always wanted to set up her own company, and Ogilvy are going to be her first client. I'm like, no, I'm not. You're shutting it down. And what am I going to tell my team? You're all stuffed, and I'm... So for me, it was very important to leave with the truth. No bad feelings, but just the truth. You can't argue with the truth. So therefore, that then allows me to just go to sleep at night and not have to kind of think, oh my God, did I tell that person the wrong thing, the right... It just is very easy and simplistic in my head to just keep it very simple and honest. And I think that's... I don't know what management thought, but always when you're a back office cost, you are always going to be vulnerable. It's a simple truth in the business world.
Okay, Thank you for that. To all of you on the panel, I just want to touch on as briefly as possible, because we've only got about 9 minutes left. When you ventured out on the companies that you're doing now, for what's the why? What's at the heart of what you've created? Because I think, Simon Sheck will obviously say that's the most important, isn't it? It's not what you do, and it's not how you do it. It's the why. Can you just share? Because a lot of people here, are sort of starting up on their own. They're looking at their own disruptive companies, and they. I think it's really nice to expose that.
My business partner actually coined this very nicely. He talks about it a lot, and what drives us is very, very simply looking in the whites of someone's eyes, as Nicole referred to earlier. It's an important part of our business, and seeing just what changing someone's life means, how they live, and we see that daily, and that's it, pure and simple, and it's just keeps us going. Simple as that.
I mean, you've seen a massive change, haven't you? You told me a story about a guy that you thought wouldn't make through the training, and actually it's changed his life entirely.
It's transformed his life, his immediate business's life, and his boss's life, all in one go, all over the course of a year or so. Yeah, and it keeps us going. We can't change the world one person at a time, but we can, we believe, do it one business at a time, if they're large enough.
Right, I mean, it's just a really simple truth. It's just propelling forward and doing things that will perhaps be bigger, better, stronger, faster. But do it in a very honest, authentic, kind way, because the change is going to happen. And the change will be for a benefit, but you just have to go through some pain, but once the change happens, it's always better for everyone. They just can't see it how you see it.
Two things. The first, I wholly concur, and tell the truth is less to remember, and that's for yourself and the other people. And the second thing, I do love a bit of geek. I created an algorithm, so I did a rich, happy destiny calculation, where rich was your salary, time with the quotients of your quarterly bonus, your annual bonus, or a lifetime buyout process. Those rich, happy was the amount of time that you worked, played, and slept on a daily basis, and your happiness quotient aligned to each of those. And then the destiny was where you're in control of your team, your company's, or your industry's destiny, and just map those out, and then you get to the truth, and you get to the why.
Have you published this? Can everybody enter?
It's very.
You have now.
I've just promoted a very old blog.
Excellent. Any other questions from the crowd? The ad industry is really quite broken at the moment. Slightly contentious maybe, but what role do you think innovation has in fixing it?
I don't think it's just the ad industry. It's every industry. It's the finance industry. It's broadcasters. It's politicians. It's everything. So I don't think it's just the business model of the ad industry. Yes, but if they can find a way to change that, then I don't think it's broken. But with the business model and how they're charging and making money in an environment that's just going to be squeezed because of technology, because procurement, even looking at when I ran the edit facility and we were doing editing, I was speaking to the kids at Ravensbourne, and they were doing exactly what we were doing, charging out on a Flame Suite or whatever. They were doing it on their laps on a Mac coming into town on the tube, and that you don't need to be a brain of Britain to think, well, that's going to go just in one direction. So I think every industry is going to feel it.
I think key to that is that innovation is part of everybody's responsibility.
Yeah.
I spend most Fridays, or 20% of the time, learning. So I'll allocate a Friday and block it out for education or for thinking or for moving forward. And then that has enabled me to survival of the flexible, not the fittest. So in order to stay ahead of, or to stay on the cutting or bleeding edge, unless you maintain that level of education throughout the workplace, how on earth is somebody going to evolve?
I do an hour every morning. I just call it scanning the environment. I used to put it on my timesheets, 8 till 9. And you have to be, you're a curious mind, and they're the ones who you want to connect with.
What do you do when you scan the environment?
The question for the live feed is, what do you do when you scan in the morning?
I start off in one space. It could be Twitter, I love Twitter. I remember years ago someone asked a question saying, a magazine, can you tell us the 5 websites that an innovation person at Ogilvy goes to? And I said, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And they came back to me with, well, that's not very innovative. But what I do was, when you follow the right people and you start in one place and you're open-minded, I used to start, say, with Stephen Fry. God knows where I'd end up. I wouldn't even know what site I would be on. It could be Sky, it could be Huffington Post, it could be BBC. You don't look at the site. You're only interested in following the person that you're following. So I wrote back to them and said, actually, the question you asked was very 20th century. So I don't know what site I'm in. I couldn't even tell you what site I follow. So, but I'll start normally in Twitter. Or LinkedIn.
And I think the answer to that really is that if you have an element of structure, then you've got lots more freedom. And that's where the real excitement and disruption can actually happen. If we hold on to that structure and that discipline, then you allow yourself to be free to go where you need to go and find what you need to find.
So I'll look at these guys and I'll go onto their feed or their LinkedIn, and then I'll see what they've posted, and then that will lead me then to somewhere else that's in sports or science that you've maybe posted, the curiosity that is there really, I think, with the person, and then it flows with what they're interested in, and then you find things you didn't know that you were even looking for.
It's called Wilfing. What am I looking for? Wilfing.
What I'm looking for. Nice. Well, we have to call it an end unless there's any last questions from the audience. Thank you so much, speakers. That's been fabulous.